Good evening and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out today to join us for this iSQI expert webinar on security myths with the intriguing title, Building Castles in the Sky. And I have actually heard this presentation already, and it's really compelling and full of useful information. So introductions. I'm not going to say too much about Keith Yorkston, other than it's an absolute privilege to have him with us. He's head of risk management at Quality Risk Management Ltd. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Keith for a lot of years, and I've seen him present on security a number of times, and you're in for a treat. My name is Debbie Archer. I'm Managing Director for iSQI Limited. I'm based here in Reading. So a little bit about iSQI to start, the International Software Quality Institute. We're a global organisation. We have offices based in Potsdam, Germany. That's actually where our International Service Centre and headquarters are. We have the Limited, which is based in the UK and where I'm actually based. We have the BV in the Netherlands, and we have the Inc in Boston. We have about 645 invigilators worldwide, and currently deliver around about 30,000 certifications per year across 6 continents, 100 countries and 10 languages. A little bit about certifications. We are a leading global exam partner for iSQB. Importantly, I'll mention that we do have the iSQB Certified Tester Advanced Level Security Tester qualification, and when we come to the end of the presentation, it may be something that you'd be interested in looking into a little bit more. Other boards we work with include the XQB for usability and user experience, IREB for requirements engineering, ISMA for software product management, TMI, the TMI Foundation test maturity model, iSQB for architecture, DASA for DevOps, and the LSSA for Lean Six Sigma. We also partner with a company called A4Q, another international certification body, to offer certifications in Selenium, design thinking, AAN software testing. And please do watch out for some information coming out on AAN software testing soon. I'll mention quickly that we have an Agile portfolio that includes Practitioner and Agile Quality, Scrum Master Pro, and Agile Business Analysis. I'm going to include this slide quickly because it's something we're often asked at the end of these webinars about exam delivery options. Where can I take an exam? So after a training course, you can take a paper-based exam or what we call a SMEX exam, which is an online exam after training. We also partner with Pearson VUE and offer exams in over 5,200 of their test centres. Of course, at the moment, with the current situation, test centres are just reopening around the world. So we're really pleased to be able to offer our Flex solution, and Flex is remote proctor. And all iSQB exams are now available from ISQI with Flex Remote Proctor, and I've included a link there so you can look at the full portfolio. I'm not going to take up any more of your time talking about iSQI, although I could spend the rest of the day chatting about the organisation. Let's get into the detail, and I'm going to hand over to Keith now, who's going to talk about the security myths, and I hope you really enjoy it.
Okay. So, Building Castles in the Sky. It's an interesting sort of title, but it's one that I feel is very appropriate for the subject that we're talking about, security, because predominantly what happens with security is we rely on information, we rely on rules, we rely on other people to let us know what security is. Now, a lot of people are a bit hesitant about security. They're thinking, oh, what do I need to know everything? What do I need to know to know stuff about security? So the session will be about 40 minutes on looking at the current security myths. So these are things that have been steeped in the legends of time, and that some people today think, okay, this is a very simple statement. It must be true because it's simple and it sounds like it should be right. And we're going to look at a lot of those. We're going to look at 8 of them specifically, just to see almost where we need to go to extend that beyond just the statement. Now, we will have a Q&A session at the end, so if you do have any questions in your GoToWebinar panel, there'll be a little a chat or Q&A that you can pop any questions into there that you have, and we can deal with those at the end of the seminar. Another thing I'd like to do, I want to do a plug for pixabay.com. If you need an image, and I'm not attached with this website in any way, but if you need a high quality image for, say, a presentation for a webinar that you're doing, if you're looking for something interesting to put behind you in a Zoom call, then Pixabay is certainly the place to go to. So all of the images that you'll see in this presentation, apart from a few that I've drawn up, actually come from Pixabay. So thumbs up to those people. Now, the premise of this, there was a guy called Henry David Thoreau, who was an extraordinary gentleman. He was a philosopher. He was an environmentalist. He was very much around equal rights. He was very much about, you know, some of the current things that we're looking at, certainly in the United States and other places around the world at the moment. An extraordinary man. Unfortunately, just when the US needed him, he's now died in 1862. So he was way ahead of his time in terms of the way that he was thinking. You could drop some of his ideas in today and they would fit absolutely perfectly. But he said some extraordinary things in his time. And one of the things that he said is that a lot of the time people will come up with these high ideals. You know, all people should be equal. You know, everyone should be equal, irrelevant of gender, of creed, of everything. But the problem with an ideal is that it's up in the sky. We've got our castle in the sky. But now we have to put the foundations under them. And this is what we find a lot with security, is that people want their data to be secure. But unless we put the foundation underneath, all we have is that castle in the sky of secure information. Now, there's another guy that I like to quote quite a lot, called Bruce Schneier. If you were to sit opposite Bruce on the train, he would look like he works in the accounts department. He's a very, you know, sort of slight, unobtrusive character, but his knowledge about security is just unbelievable. He's the sort of guy that will advise governments on what they should do. And one of his premises is around the security mindset. So the quote that we've got on the page there, the security mindset involves thinking about how things can be made to fail. Now, a lot of the time as a tester, for instance, so I've worked for 20 years in software testing, looking at quality risk, but also having a background in security before I even got into IT and then moving that forward. A lot of the time people think with testing that you're trying to make something fail. And of course, that's not true. What you're doing is trying to make sure that this thing works. And if there are any points where it breaks, hopefully we will find them. But the interesting thing we're doing here with security is we want it to fail. So what we're doing is we're looking for a thing called a vulnerability. And a vulnerability can be anything that can cause that system's security to fail. Now, bear in mind, I'm talking about a system. A system might be a website, or it might be an application, but it could also be your internal mail handling procedure. It could be the way people in your organization answer the phone. And what we have to do as a security person, in effect, is we have to think like the bad guys. We have to think like the attacker. Sometimes people think it's a bit strange, but when I walk into a shop, I look to see how I can steal things. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to walk out with a bag over my back full of handbags and coats and things. But what it does mean is I'm looking at the situation as the adversary would look at it. If we find a vulnerability, well, it doesn't mean that we're going to exploit it. What we've done is we found a weakness in that security. We found a weakness in that system. And ultimately, we would advise someone. Now, of course, I'm not going to run up to every shop assistant and say, oh, by the way, if you did blah, 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 to improve your security. It's more of an exercise that I do. But it comes in quite handy because my house is pretty secure. But every few months or so, I look at my house and think, if I wanted to break into my own house, how would I do it? And those times when I've locked the keys in the house, it has come in very handy. Yes, I tell my son to close his window now. But this is the way that we've got to think. We've got to think about the problem as an adversary, as someone from the outside coming in. And it may not always be someone from the outside, but we'll talk about that more a little later on. Now, one of the other big things that we have with security is that organizations tend to transition through their ideas around security. At the beginning, you know, it might be a new organization, we're only just starting up, and maybe people are just getting their feet under the table, and security really isn't an issue. So we've sort of got this chaotic sort of behavior. And people, yeah, they know to lock up and turn the alarm on, but everyone's got a key and we can all get in and turn the alarm off when we need to. But then what happens is that as the organization then starts to grow, we go into a second stage where it becomes very regimented. So this is where you've got security documentation, you've got security procedures you have to follow. And you will follow the rules. We have a set of rules you must follow. This is where most organizations stop. And what happens is they rely too much on these rules. Now, once again, another wise person, a guy called Karl Popper, he came up with this idea around clocks and clouds. Is that one of the mistakes that we make, and in fact, the worst mistakes that are made, is when we treat clouds as if they were clocks. People are clouds. Clouds are in the sky as I look out the window at the moment. There's a grey overcast. And bearing in mind how long you've been inside for the last couple of months, you might be feeling a bit grey and overcast as well. But clouds change. We've got all different types of clouds, different shapes, and they all tend to exist in all these weird and wonderful shapes and ways. Clocks, on the other hand, are regimented. They're precise. They work on a series of rules, whether it's a digital watch or whether it's an old-fashioned clock with a whole lot of cogs that all turning at a certain rate cause the hours to move. But the problem we get is when we treat people like they're a machine. And this is what happens in a lot of organizations, is they stay in that second stage, that regimented stage about security. The third stage after that is where we're empowered. We've got skilled security leadership. And that's where the organization starts to change. You don't rely as much on set rules and things like that because people are more security aware. And so it's that third stage that all organizations should be trying to move towards. They don't need to have 28 rules that they know 26 of those aren't going to be followed, because people know what to look for. They know about vulnerabilities. They know how to spot a vulnerability. They might be aware of threats. So a threat is someone or something that potentially is going to use a vulnerability to attack your organization. And it's that third stage, as I said, that we should be moving towards, where everyone is empowered in terms of security. So let's start looking at some of those myths. Now, one of the big problems that we have, and this is just an example I did at the beginning of this week, where I've gone in and grabbed a whole lot of COVID-19 related security issues. And these were some of the headlines that were coming up. Now, you might look at this and say, oh, look, we've got email scams. So we've got phishing attempts. So Captain Tom Moore, the EasyJet passengers, they're phishing scams. So you get an email, click on the link, bad things happen. You might accidentally give away personal details. The interesting one down the bottom though, so fraud, and that's what we're talking about here. So people are making fraud claims against universal credit. I'm very interested in looking at security from a whole lot of different ways. And in fact, on Radio 4 on the BBC here in the UK, just at the beginning of the week, they had a really good article on crime during the pandemic. And it was fascinating. One of the statements that one of the senior officers who was being interviewed on the program said is that crime abhors a vacuum. So you might think, oh, well, no one's going to break in because no one's outside and you're inside at home. Hey, our homes might be safe. But they were looking at a whole lot of different scams, like scams around car sales. So people, oh, yes, look, we can't travel. Here's the card. You want to buy it? You know, grabbing a picture of a car from wherever they get their car pictures from. And there were a number of instances of crimes that were being committed in the, in the lockdown period. And I can pretty well guarantee that every training course that you will attend up until this point would have had nothing that was up to date in it. So if you think about the training programs you might have at work, they won't cover this stuff. You know, a lot of the training programs will say, oh, if you get a phishing email, this is how you recognize. You know, it might be, oh, the email's been spoofed, or it might have a malicious link, or it might be an email sent as an anonymous email. You know, it's not sent to Dear Keith in this case, it's sent to Dear Customer. But who do you send it to if you suspect it? What steps do you take if you know that that could be vulnerable? So these are some of the things that I'll rant about a little later on. But it just goes to show that even in this period, people are evolving the way that they're looking for vulnerabilities. And that's the thing. In our organizations, there are thousands of vulnerabilities. And we have to find those and make them maybe a little less vulnerable. As an attacker, I've only got to find one. It might be that you've got magnetic doors that lock after people go in. I can open those with a 10p coin. It might be that you've got security scanning to enter your building. Well, I can get in that. And these are some of the things that we need to think about, is that not so much, oh, we've got this, therefore we're safe. We should be thinking, great, we've got this. How could I breach that? How could I attack that? Is there a vulnerability there? So we need to always update the stuff that we're covering in terms of security. And I'll talk about that a little later on. So the first myth is around passwords. We've got great password rules. You might have seen ones like this before: minimum of 8 characters, uppercase numbers, lowercase letters, special characters, change it every 30 days. Well, let me show you something. I'll now pop up a set of passwords that comply with those rules. So the first one, minimum of 8 characters. There we go, there's 8 characters. That is following that rule. We've got to have upper and lowercase. There we go. We've got to have a number in there. There's one. Has to have a special character. Has to be updated every 30 days. That password at the bottom is compliant with all of those rules. What we have to understand with security is there's a very big psychological background to security. There's a thing called social engineering that if you ever come across, if you've ever bought a used car, there is social engineering going on. All right, these are people who understand psychology of the buyer, or in this case, understand the psychology of the victim of the attack. And the problem is that our psychology has a lot to do with security. Now you might think, well, I've got a secure password. No one could know what my password is. I won't do it by a show of hands, but how many people's passwords start with a capital? How many people's password end with a number? Straight away, I've got two characters that are in your password. Capital A to Z, number 0 to 9. Now, the way that password cracking tools work is what they will do is they will try and encrypt a known word into the password hash, goes through a number of steps, and then it will match the hash that might have been captured by someone hacking a particular site. So if you've got something like this, well, that might be very easy to hack. If I know that your password's going to start with a capital and end with a lowercase, end with a number, then I've got two of the characters that I could supply the tool and say, look, it will start with a character, it'll end with a number. The whole process now is starting to be automated. And this is the scary thing, is that what can happen today is people will get email addresses, because we know a lot of us use email addresses as our username for various sites, whether it's Amazon or eBay or PayPal or whatever site it is. So our username is usually an email address. So what the attackers might do is they might have a dictionary file. These passwords you see here are the top 25 plucked passwords in 2019. Now, these lists exist quite a lot, and depending on who's building the list, they will vary slightly. But look at these passwords. Now, this is where psychology comes into. Look at the number that are sequential. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, look, all those keys line up. QWERTY, oh, they all line up. And in fact, the number that are sequential, so either the repetition of a key or keys that are adjacent to each other. Even number 13 down the bottom there. Have a look at your keyboard. Q1, W2, E3. And this is because it's easy. There are some that probably ship with the product. Password, admin, welcome, password 1. How many times are you told by your IT organization, we've set the password as capital password 123. Make sure you change it when you go into the application. How many people don't? There's another type of attack that we can do, which is a dictionary attack. Lovely, princess, dragon. These are English words. So if I was to rattle through the Oxford Concise English Dictionary, would I break your password? Could I try variations on that? So yeah, capital versus lowercase, number at the end of that. And in fact, the only one that stands out is number 8 there, I love you. The only problem is it's number 8. That means it's the 8th most used password that was broken. So understanding psychology can help with understanding security. How do people think? So, points around passwords. First one is don't use a password. Don't use a word. Passphrases. Passwords, to be able to crack a password, basically, it's easier if it's short. You could have a password of 12 random upper, lowercase, special characters, numbers, that won't be as secure as DOG with 20 full stops after it. The length of the password matters, because of course, if I have to brute force where I'm throwing random sets of characters, well, if I've got to do combinations of, works out to be something like 20 to the power of 96, I think, from memory. That's a really big number. That's how many attempts I might need to go through all of those combinations. And then we'd have to do as a factorial as well. So it's a very big maths problem. Think of a phrase. Now, the sort of things we can think about, lines from movies or books. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Poems, song lyrics. But come up with a memorable phrase rather than just rely on a single word. More characters, it's longer. I mean, anybody who today restricts passwords to, it has to be less than 15 characters, well, I'd be tempted not even to use that site. All right, the longer the password is, the better it is. Random words is another good one. There's a hotel that I stay at in the past. And what it would do is to log into their internet in the hotel, you needed to supply your room number, your last name, and 3 random words that they would give each guest that was staying at the hotel. So every person staying at the hotel would get an individual set of 3 words. So you needed to have those 3 bits of information to log into the Wi-Fi in the hotel. It was a really good system. So random words. You might be sitting at your desk, and if I look around, now this might sound a bit strange, but I can see paint, clock, lawnmower. 3 random words. If you know another language, a lot of the time when a dictionary attack is done, they will throw English words. So you might do cheese as an English word. You might do Kass as a German word, the German word for cheese, and fromage for the French. There's 3 random words, or the same word in 3 languages. The last point there is make sure it's unique. Because remember before I said that if they know your username, what they will do is they will start to try and hack the password. Now, this whole process is automated today. So what they will do is they will try various passwords on various sites, maybe Amazon, eBay, PayPal, stuff like that. Now, what they'll do is they won't try and log on to those sites. They might hack a smaller site. They will break your password that's on that smaller site. So they've got the username and that password. What they then do is they try that combination on Amazon, eBay, PayPal, Spotify, whatever the website, all the different banks, for instance. This is why we need to have a unique password for all of the sites that we visit, is because if one of those gets breached, potentially all of them could be breached. So I've spent a little bit of time on passwords because this is something that we can all do to improve our security. If we know that passwords are vulnerable, if they're short, if they're on that top 25 list, then we know that we need to change it. If we know that a longer password is better, we can use that. Now, there's another thing that comes up with passwords, and that is password managers. I'm keeping the castle theme going here. If you've ever been to the Tower of London, these gentlemen will have potentially showed you around. I used to drink beer with them many years ago. They're a great bunch of folks that are looking after the tower. But the idea of a password manager is absolutely excellent, and it can also be a really bad idea. So you've got a secure storage locker that you're going to store all of the various passwords that you use for all of the sites that you visit. And that's a great thing. We know that they're going to be encrypted. We know that they're stored away, all well and good. But it can also be a very bad idea because, hey, if you want to steal the crown jewels, you know where they are. They're in the Tower of London. Now, the security on that is very good. I dare say you're not going to get away with it. Fans of Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch might disagree with me, but nonetheless, the problem we've got here is that if your password manager is vulnerable, so it's always a good idea. If you're going to choose a password manager, it is a great idea, but make sure you look and see that that password manager is secure. Don't just look at the company's website. Have a look at security sites, have a look for news articles, have a look for information on that password manager. If you have someone in your organization that is, in quotes, looking after security, ask them about it. And you must make sure that the password or the passphrase, I should say, that you use to get into this, you absolutely have to make sure it's a good one. You only have to remember one, so this one has to be a good one. But remember, if I can get into that password manager, then all bets are off. There's a couple of well-known hackers. There's a guy called Kevin Mitnick. And one of the tactics that he uses when he's assessing the vulnerability of an organization is he will give, he knows of vulnerabilities in password managers. He might substitute a password manager with a cracked version of one. Oh, you need a password manager. Here's one that almost works, but he knows where the back doors are. Don't worry, Kevin Mitnick did spend some time in jail for hacking, but now runs his own security company. So he's come good in the long run. So yeah, password managers are good, but they can also be bad. Okay, myth 2. Our organization is too small. We've only got a few people working for us. We will never be attacked. I'm here to say no target is too small. Let's do a little bit of a thought experiment. Let's think of two organizations. We've got Amazon and we've got Flowers by Karen, local florist that's down the road. Now, Amazon is a huge organization. $87 billion in revenue. So yeah, there's a lot of money going through Amazon. There's a very well-known defect that was in Amazon many years ago, that if you put in a negative number, so if you put in, I want the £20,000 Rolex, I want -1 of those, that they would still send you the item, but rather than debit your credit card, they would credit it. So you'd end up with a Rolex and 20 grand. Of course, they closed that door very quickly, but hey, it was good to know that even Amazon sometimes make mistakes. With Karen though, a lot smaller, 170,000 in revenue, only 2 employees, but the IT's done by Karen's son. Quite often what will happen is small organizations are a likely target for an attack, purely for the reason that if you're a small organization, I can use your credentials, your system, to maybe get into a bigger organization. There was a very famous hack against Target, the big set of department stores in the US and around the world. And they were hacked in early 2014, I think it was, or quite a few years ago. And the way that they were hacked was through an air conditioning company who had a login into their systems. So what the hackers did is they hacked the air conditioning company to then get into the Target systems to then gain access to a whole lot of information that they shouldn't have. Now, admittedly, things like payment processing, security on websites, a lot of that now is outsourced. So you might go to Squarespace or Wix.com for your website. You might use PayPal or WorldPay or some other payment processing organization. So some of those vulnerabilities have been removed, which is good, but never ever think that you're too small. Small organizations are a target. Big organizations, well, I know that you're going to be able to afford to spend a lot more money on security than a small organization might be able to. We've got antivirus. Oh, that's going to be good enough. All of our machines have got antivirus, and that's good. I will never say that that's a bad thing. But the problem we've got is that that's only looking at one area that could have a vulnerability. You know, antivirus is only very limited in scope as well. So it's stopping bad things from happening on this machine. Now, admittedly, antivirus is getting much more capable today. You know, safe browsing, password managers, all of that stuff now comes with your antivirus. But antivirus does nothing against process and people. Antivirus won't help that person giving information over the phone that they shouldn't be. Antivirus won't help your confidential waste bin going missing. We're only covering technology, and we're only covering part of that. And this is the mistake that a lot of organizations make. They only think about security in terms of IT, not in terms of who's walking in and out the door. You know, I've worked for a lot of large organizations and a lot of people go in and out the door each day. I once did a little experiment in an office where I was working, is we had magnetically sealed doors. One of the fascinating things was everybody walked up, pushed the button to open the door to unlock it, and then walked out. No one realized the door was unlocked. Luckily, the seat where I was sitting, I could watch the door and see how many people, see if anybody did come in that shouldn't be. But it was amazing. We went for days and no one knew that that door was unlocked. Because the process was to get out, you press the button, you push the door. Had you have just pushed the door, you would have got out. So it's vulnerabilities that we've got in terms of process and people that also need to be covered. The fourth myth, security is IT's problem. So the definition of teamwork, it was their fault. Well, once again, just as I was talking about there, a lot of the time technology is well covered. You know, many organizations I work with, they do spend a lot of time. They get people to look at technology. There could still be vulnerabilities. It might be that something was unpatched. Oh, it's going to be a real pain to patch that thing. Oh, we won't worry about it now. We'll leave it and do it later. It gets forgotten about, organization gets hacked. But it might also be, as I said, information being given out over the phone. It might be that confidential waste was discovered in a place it shouldn't be, or people just leaving documents on their desk, you know, leaving a laptop on the train, putting stuff on memory sticks so you can take it home with you, or on laptops to take home with you. All right, all about that process side of it. So IT can't be responsible for everything. What we need to do is we need to cover security in a much broader brush. Threats are external. So you're imagining maybe a darkened room with a young, angry person in a hoodie typing away furiously on their machine. Or maybe you're imagining a large room full of people in uniform directed against an enemy of that country. Well, the downside that we've got is that, unfortunately, 90% of organizations have been hacked. The other 10% don't even know about it. And the reason being is because it might be someone internal. There was a very big data breach at Morrison's where all of the Morrison's staff's details were released into the public. And that was done by a malicious insider. It might be that your organization every Monday sends out a sales forecast to all of the salespeople. You know, these are the clients, these are the people that we're updating. Oh, hang on. What about the people that have left the organization? What about the people that put in their Gmail account rather than their company email? What about the person that prints an extra copy of the document just to maybe give to a mate to have a look at? So these are some of the things we potentially need to look at. And there's all sorts of process around, you know, least access and things like that that we can look at to maybe improve internal security. If somebody does try and hack us, of course, we will know immediately. No, you won't. As we said before, 90% of organizations have been hacked. The other 10% don't even realize it yet. What was the vulnerability? Who was the threat? How was it exploited? It might be it's a phone call. I only find out one piece of information, but I might be able to use that. There was a fellow that I know recently that was subject to a mystery email that came from one of his bosses. He said, "Oh, quick, go and buy some Google Play cards or Apple cards or whatever it was." And he said, "Oh, gee, it comes from the boss. I better go and do it." How would we know unless we know what to look for? And that's going back, looking at the vulnerabilities. Who could be the threat? What information could they be after? So a lot of the time, it's in fact, we're playing a little bit of blind man's bluff. And as Holmes would say, we see, but we do not observe. Now, I see this quite a lot where people go into an organization. One of my favorite tricks is tailgating. Now, straight away, people think, well, tailgating, I know. If someone's trying to follow me into the office, I know they're trying to get in. I'll be able to stop them. But it's surprising how often you can get into places you shouldn't just by being nice. Carry something, be talking on the phone, and people will open doors for you because that's what mum and dad told you to do. You know, say please and thank you, wash your hands after you go to the toilet, and hold the door open for people. Oh, but you've got to scan your card as you go in. I've had security guards let me into buildings because I've been carrying stuff. The best time to get into a building is when everyone's leaving. You're putting your bag on, you're thinking, great, day's over, to the pub. And as you walk out the door, open the security door, someone walks in. And you go, oh, okay, he's walking in, he must be okay, pub time. It's even worse when there's two people walking in, having a conversation. Oh, well, gee, they must be okay. They're talking to each other. This is how an organization can be vulnerable. And don't rely on people pointing out, there's a stranger over there. Because once someone's in a secure area, no one asks them why they're there. They're thinking, oh, well, if they're in here, someone must have checked them. They must be okay. We already have training. We already have tests. We don't need extra stuff. Well, one of the problems you get is a lot of the time the training isn't quite there. I recently worked for a large company that had some online training you had to do every year. You have to do your security training every year. And it was literally, it was a joke. You know, what does CIA stand for? Now, apart from Central Intelligence Agency, confidentiality, availability, and integrity. You had to remember what those three words were. And that was your training on security. But what does that mean? What does that mean when you pick up the phone? What does it mean when you get the email? And if you're actually looking at the captions that we've got there, a lot of security training is that useful because a lot of the time the security training is purchased by someone who knows nothing about security. They go to an organization that sells online training You know, oh, we need an e-learning module on security. Oh yeah, we've got one of those. Great, we've got a security training. Tick. Have you done your security training this year? Yes, we have. Tick. And next year, it's the same. The year after, it's the same. It doesn't move on. It doesn't address the current threat. All we're doing is we're getting ticks in a little human resources list to say, yes, we do compulsory security training. Oh, we'll be okay for our audit. But it's about as useful as an ashtray on a motorbike, because you don't learn anything. It's just an exercise that you need to do for 20 minutes to then get that over and done with, so your boss doesn't get up you because you haven't done your security training. So to summarize, we need to develop a better passphrase policy. All right. And one of the ways you can do that is by teaching people about passwords. There's a very good video by a guy called Edward Snowden. It was interviewed by another fellow called John Oliver. If you put in Snowden Oliver interview, or it's actually Snowden Oliver passwords into YouTube, it's absolutely brilliant. It will tell you exactly what you need. About 2 minutes, 40 seconds worth of video. You will learn a lot from it. Any organization is a target. You are never too small to be a target. All right, because you might have some information that I need to get somewhere else. You might be a backdoor into something bigger. Or hey, you might just have lax security, a lot of vulnerabilities that I could exploit. Antivirus is good. I will never say that it isn't, but technology, process, people need to be considered. Think about how things are done in the office. Think about how do people respond to those things. I'm sure there's certain rules that you skip. Why? Is it because the rule's out of date, or is it just because it's a hassle? It's everybody's problem, not just IT's, to recognize vulnerabilities. And a vulnerability could be anything. It could be an unlocked window. It could be paperwork left out. It could be the wrong person getting in the wrong area. External threats, internal threats are threats. Full stop, end of story. You're stopping threats from exploiting vulnerabilities. Just because someone works for your organization doesn't mean that they're to be trusted. That's one of the mistakes a lot of people make, is you're automatically trusted because you work for us. Know how to identify threats. Think like an attacker. In what way could I be attacking an organization? And the only way you can do it is by doing that thought exercise, attacking the organization. And the last one there, make sure that the training that you're doing is relevant and it's current. You know, one of the best ways that you can move from that second stage, that rule-based, we all have to do it this way, to that third stage of skilled security awareness, is just by getting people interested in security. And there's a mountain of stuff that's available. Go to YouTube, look for a TV show called The Real Hustle. It's absolutely brilliant because it shows you how people can be exploited. It shows you how people can be hacked. There was a really good one where in a vacant lot in a Midlands town in the UK, they put a sign up that said parking £10, all day parking. Wow, that's really cheap. As people were coming up. So these guys put on reflective vests. So immediately, oh, they're wearing a uniform. We trust them. So as they came up and parked, they said, oh, how long are you going to be away? They said, oh, we're going shopping. We'll be a couple of hours. Okay, what we'll do is we'll park your car and we'll put it in a spot in the lot. So when you arrive, we can get it out and we know to, you know, so you can get away, sort of thing. What people don't realize is you've just given your car keys to someone. Okay, they could steal your car. but they could also get in your car, press home on the sat nav, drive to your house, unlock with your keys, empty your house out, drive back with your stuff in your car, put it in the van they've got on the lot, and lo and behold, when you arrive home, oh, you've been burgled. There's websites you can go to, theregister.co.uk, Schneier.com, krebsonsecurity.com. There's a mountain of different websites that you can go to find out information about security. The main thing is thinking like the attacker. It's the security mindset. You can't be good at everything in terms of security, but most people are good at least one thing, and that's something we should look at. So that's enough of me ranting on about security. Debbie, what I'll do is I'll throw control back over to you, and if any questions have come through.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you for a really great overview of the various aspects of security that people need to consider. One of the things I take away with me is very much around the life skill, which is understanding why things like the passphrases are so important, and real interesting learning. From a questions point of view, I have one here. As you might expect, we have a lot of testers who actually link in with iSQI, and somebody's saying, I'm interested in moving from a testing role into a more security testing role. Can Keith give some advice, please?
Oh, it's a good question. So the first thing I would do is, for specific testing stuff, there is the obviously the iSQI security tester course, but it depends a lot on, do you know about testing and want to find out about security? The course is good for that because it introduces you to that security side, but as well, if you know about security, it also introduces you to the testing side. And it's quite interesting when you get both of those groups of people together. Some other things you can do for information as well is also look at, there's the OWASP website, OWASP, which is a open web something protection security. I can't even remember what OWASP stands for now, but that's a very good site to look at. And then the sites that I've mentioned, so the register.co.uk, Schneier.com, Krebs on Security. There's a large number of sites out there that you can get information on security. But one of the things you'll need to do is obviously have that qualification to go along with that. If you've already got your foundation certificate, you could get the iSQI security tester. There's also other ones. There's the CompTIA Security Plus, which is a good sort of ground level security course that you can do. And then there's also the CISSP, which is a much higher level qualification that you can get. So yeah, if you are interested in testing, then obviously there is a testing related course. One of the problems you get with the other courses is there's very little in there on testing. Hopefully the person that asked that, hopefully that's answered that one for you.
I've just had a thumbs up, so hopefully that's a positive thing. Bear with me half a second. Someone's saying here that a lot of what you've talked about is aimed at users. How can we better educate users? You say training is not always good.
One of the things that you can do for users is actually start to bring up potential vulnerabilities in an industry. So let's say you're working in, I don't know, the travel industry. So there might be particular vulnerabilities in that industry that that might be relevant. There could be potential threats to that industry that might be relevant. But a lot of the time it's a general awareness. It could be everything from various phishing attacks that might have gone on to the office. So quite often what will happen is someone will get a set of email addresses and everyone will get the same phishing email. So letting people know about that. Some of the general stuff that you can do as well. I mean, it's the quality of that sort of generic once-a-year training that is way out of date. It needs to be improved on. So actually looking at what the current vulnerabilities, the current threats might be. You know, it might be worthwhile with colleagues at work to actually look at what the threats might be in the current time with the lockdown going on. It might be that you're changing from an office-based server infrastructure to cloud-based. What might be the vulnerabilities there? Now, some of that stuff might be way above a lot of people in the office, but just making them generally aware. You know, everything down from how you answer the phone. There was a lady that used to, well, probably still does work in an office that I worked in, and it was an absolute pleasure to stand and listen to her answer phone calls, because straight away she was so experienced that she knew straight away this person's going to try and browbeat me and use fear. This person's going to try and, oh, you know, I'm really in trouble here. Can you help me? You know, empathy. You could almost see what they were trying to do. No, you can't have that information. You can send your email to info@. So it was so extraordinary just watching that knowledgeable person. So sometimes there are people that you are unaware of that even have that security knowledge in your organization. Speak to them, get them to write a little story up. You know, oh, I had this phone call this week. You know, send it out to people. But that's the way that you can do it, is actually notify the organization, let them know what the vulnerabilities might be. Let them know what the various threats could be. And it's not all IT based. Remember, it could be someone walking in the door. Oh, I've got a meeting with the CEO. Can you just print out this document for me? You know, that's a favorite one. There was a hotel that I know of that got hacked 3 times exactly that way. You know, and what they did is they locked all of the doors. So, you know, you have a little swipe card to unlock the door. 3 times they locked all the doors in the hotel. None of the keys would work until they coughed up some Bitcoin.
It's very much about culture as much as training and the same mindset, I think.
Very much so.
Question for you here. You mentioned the iSQI certified security tester. What differentiates that from the other certifications you have mentioned? Before you answer that, Keith, can I just say thank you to Mike Smith, who has confirmed that it's Open Web Application Security Project, so OWASP. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. I'm sometimes bad with the TWAs that we use in IT.
That's the question about the difference between the type of certification, specifically the content.
The problem you get with things like, you know, ethical hacker courses, the OWASP Top 10 is another one. I would encourage people to look at the OWASP Top 10, but don't go by that 100%, because, hey, I'll just use vulnerability number 11 to attack you. The problem we get with a lot of the courses that I've mentioned is that they are very restricted in terms of the testing side of stuff. So they don't really delve too much into testing. They're more positioned with infrastructure people, you know, system admins, network admins, developers. Testing tends to get left out quite a bit. So that's why the security tester course is a good one, because it is dealing specifically from the testing point of view. I'm not saying that the other qualifications are bad things to have. They always are useful things to have. But if you're going there to get testing knowledge, you're not going to get that.
Thank you, Keith. Question here, do you do seminars on defensive programming?
Oh, good question. I don't personally. If you're interested in defensive programming, though, have a look at the SANS.org. So SANS.org. Now, once again, they're very specific. I can't speak to if the question was to do with web stuff online, because basically OWASP and SANS have a lot of stuff for web-based applications, web-based security. but there are quite a lot of defensive programming courses out there. Have a look at what SANS offer, because I can't credit them highly enough. Their programs are always very up to date. They're very good. So yeah, maybe worthwhile having a look at those organisations. There's an IEEE document, which is Secure Coding Guidelines, which is also another really useful document just to look at. It doesn't tell you specifically about whether you're using Java or C# or whatever the language may be, but it gives you a general set of rules that you can follow.
Thank you, Keith. I think we've actually run over just by a minute or so. So I'm going to close the session and say a huge thank you to you. If anybody does want to ask Keith any more questions, then please do get in touch. Either contact iSQI and we can give you his details, or contact him directly. Hopefully you can see his email address there. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. Again, fascinating session, and thank you, and I wish you all a very, very pleasant evening.